She smiled and said, "You'll never have to worry again." Last spring in Lakeview, I took her at her word. My name is Martha, I'm 58, and Emma is my only daughter. After my hip surgery, she moved me into her house so recovery would be easy. I believed it because I wanted to. I told myself this was family, not charity. The stakes were simple: heal or fall behind for good. That first morning, the kitchen smelled of coffee and cinnamon, steady and warm, and I thought, this is safety. We started by unpacking a few boxes: family photos, a chipped tea mug, the folded quilt my mother stitched. I traced the stitching and thought about all the winters it survived. Emma was bright, efficient, already reorganizing drawers and explaining how she liked the towels stacked. I nodded, grateful. I could walk the hallway without a cane if I pressed the wall. I whispered a promise to myself: don't be a burden. I had no plans to be one. The first chores were small. If you rinse the dishes, I'll load the washer. I rinsed. If you wipe the counters, I'll take the trash. I wiped. A day later, she left a pad on the counter with tidy lines and little boxes to tick. Purely to keep track, she said, cheerful in a way that felt practiced. It was easier to agree than to argue. I told myself structure would help me stay useful. That belief was my first mistake. We stopped by the clinic to finalize my follow-up. At the desk, a clerk named Ben slid a packet toward me. "Caregiving consent, just so we can talk with your daughter about appointments," he said. His tone was routine, like handing out bandages. I scanned the pages. The language looked harmless: share updates, coordinate care. Emma's pen hovered. "It's for convenience," she said. I signed. Ben stamped the top sheet and slid me a copy. It felt official, like a door closing with a polite latch. On the third morning, the list filled the pad. Not just dishes and counters, baseboards, windows, the porch steps. "You always liked keeping busy," she said, setting a bucket beside the sink. I looked at my incision, still tender, and told myself movement was therapy. By afternoon, my back throbbed. "That's enough for today," I tried. "Almost done," she answered, and added, "sweep garage," to tomorrow. I wanted rest, but I wanted peace more. You can lose a house and a job and still feel all right if you have peace. That night, I stared at the porch light through the thin curtain and told myself this was a season, nothing more. Seasons turn. I held the tea mug with both hands and listened to the house settle. If gratitude had a shape, I tried to match it. The next day she said, "We should make this official." She pulled a clipboard from a drawer, smooth as if she had practiced the motion. "I'll write what you do. It helps me plan meals and errands." It sounded reasonable, even kind. I nodded again. She drew boxes, wrote times, and handed me the pen. "Initial each line," she said, "just so we're on the same page." I signed the first 2 lines without reading them twice. I didn't want to be difficult. Is it difficult to ask for boundaries? By midweek, the kindness thinned. Emma's smile held, but not her patience. I was halfway down the hallway with a basket when she blocked me with the mop. "It streaks if you walk on it," she said, voice flat. "I'll wait," I answered. "You could fold the towels while you wait." She held my eyes as if daring me to complain. I folded. The towels were warm from the dryer, and the simple heat felt like it belonged to someone else. 2 nights later, I rehearsed what I needed to say. I could keep helping, but I needed a limit. My hip ached after too much standing. Recovery mattered more than shiny floors. I found her at the island, tapping her phone. "I need to slow down." She didn't look up. "From what?" "From the list. It's too much." "It's not. It is for me." "That's ridiculous." My hands shook, but my voice stayed steady. "I'm asking for rest." She finally met my eyes. A small silence stretched. I thought of the clinic packet in my purse, the stamped page that quietly named me as dependent. Had I given away more than updates? A single signature can turn a life if you don't watch it closely. Ben's ordinary stamp echoed in my head as if it had weight. "I'm trying to heal," I said. "I'm not refusing to help. I'm telling you I can't do everything, every day." The stake was simple and hard. If I kept pushing, I would fail my body. If I argued, I might lose my place. I needed a line she would respect. She set the phone down, slow, as if lowering a blade. "Is that how you see it?" The cheer was gone from her voice, replaced by something cooler, practiced. She reached for the pad, flicked to tomorrow, and drew additional squares in neat rows. Her pen made small, decisive sounds. I stood very still. I had trusted the promise, trusted the house, trusted the paper at the clinic. I could feel the ground shifting under those facts, turning familiar things into leverage. When she finally lifted her eyes, I recognized the look. Not care, but management. Her smile faded when I asked for rest. The list kept growing until it filled the fridge. Each line written in her careful handwriting felt like another inch of distance between us. At first, I thought structure might bring calm. Now it only brought pressure. The pen squeaked each morning as she added new tasks: scrub, polish, fold. The sound carried through the kitchen like a clock marking servitude instead of time. I would stare at the ink drying, wondering how care had turned into command. The first week blurred into a rhythm: dawn, chores, dinner. The fridge door was a billboard of obligation. I crossed out each task with shaky lines, but she replaced them faster than I could erase them. "You're contributing," she'd say. "Everyone does their part." I wanted to believe her, but every small job turned into 3 more. I began counting hours the way I once counted pills: 2 before breakfast, 2 after lunch, 2 before bed. My hip never stopped aching. Money had never been a sharp subject between us. Until it was. I opened my account one afternoon and noticed the balance lower than it should have been. $2,300 gone. I told myself it was hospital billing or a misposted check. The stakes were rising, and I could feel it in my chest. When I asked about it, she said calmly, "Oh, I moved that to cover utilities." Her tone had that practiced innocence that leaves no space for argument. "It's our account now, remember?" she added, before turning away to stir a pot. I called the bank. The hold music droned for 12 minutes, long enough for me to question whether I was overreacting. Finally, a man answered. I explained the situation, trying to sound factual. "I just want to make sure the withdrawal was authorized." He promised to review the joint setup. The printer hummed faintly in the background as he confirmed my name and address. The sound was steady, impersonal, mechanical, yet it grounded me. "We'll send you a statement," he said. "You should see it within a few days." His voice softened. "You're doing the right thing." That night, I tried to bring it up again. "Did you transfer that money?" I asked quietly. She didn't even pause her chopping. "You worry too much," she said. "Banks always mix things up." The knife thudded against the board. "It's handled." I watched her husband glance at me, then down at his plate. Not once did he open his mouth. Silence can be a stronger ally than any lie. Later, after dishes, she wiped her hands and smiled. "You're safe here, Mom. You just need to trust us." Her words had warmth, but no weight. I nodded, though inside, something began to shift. I wrote the date, April 10th, on a scrap of paper and hid it in my notebook, beside the grocery lists and medication reminders. If trust was currency, I was already bankrupt. The next morning, I found a fresh list taped to the fridge. Larger print, more boxes. "You've got good energy," she said. "Might as well use it." My hands were raw from cleaning. I turned to her. "I'm supposed to be resting." She tilted her head. "Rest is lazy." The phrase stung worse than any slap. I swallowed it down and picked up the mop. I couldn't risk confrontation, not yet. As I moved across the kitchen floor, the tiles squeaked faintly under my steps. The house was spotless, but it didn't feel clean. It felt inspected. Every corner seemed to hold a silent judgment, every object a reminder of my dependence. I wiped, polished, and folded until my fingers cramped. The notebook on the counter stared back at me, filled with tasks that now looked like confessions. By evening, I'd decided to check the mailbox for that statement. The paper would prove I wasn't losing my mind. Proof mattered more than comfort now. When I stepped inside again, she was standing by the fridge, marker in hand, already writing tomorrow's list. Her husband leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded, though my voice failed me. The marker squeaked one last time before she capped it. "I've decided to handle the finances myself," she said. "It's easier that way." Something in me froze. "You already do," I murmured. She smiled like it was a compliment. "Then we're in agreement." I went to my room and sat on the bed, holding the old tea mug like it might offer advice. The walls hummed faintly with the refrigerator's motor, the only steady sound in a house that didn't feel like mine. I reached for my purse to check the card one more time. It wasn't there. I emptied the contents, fingers trembling, wallet, tissues, folded receipts, but no card. I knew before I tested it. That night, my debit card stopped working. The spare key vanished from my purse. I emptied it twice on the bed, shaking out every pocket, but it was gone. I checked the counter, the coat hooks, even under the sink. When I asked about it, she didn't hesitate. "You must have misplaced it." Her voice was calm, but her eyes didn't match. That's when I noticed she carried hers on a bright red lanyard now, visible, deliberate. The next morning, the back door clicked shut, and I realized I was the only one in that house who couldn't step outside without permission. Cold air drifted through the kitchen window that didn't quite close. I pulled my sweater tighter. "Was it for safety?" I asked. She glanced up from her coffee. "You forget things," she said, smiling like she was explaining something to a child. "This is easier." I stared at her, trying to find the part that cared about my comfort. All I saw was efficiency. The quiet grew louder in that house. Every sound meant something. The tick of the thermostat, the dull thud of her husband's shoes leaving for work, the creak of her steps when she checked if I'd finished my list. I started folding towels just to fill the noise. The motion gave me a rhythm, a way to pretend normalcy still existed. But it was performance, not peace. By afternoon, I'd convinced myself to call the police non-emergency line. I told them calmly, "My daughter has the only keys. I'm not locked in exactly, but I can't leave freely." The officer's tone was tired. "Domestic misunderstanding," he said as he logged the report. That word landed heavy. Misunderstanding, like this was just confusion, like my fear was too small for attention. "We can note it," he added. "Call back if it escalates." I thanked him, though I knew that meant I was on my own. That evening, she stood by the sink. "Did you call someone?" she asked, too casually. My heart tripped over itself. "I asked about spare keys," I said. "Don't lie," she snapped, then softer, almost sweet. "You really shouldn't make this harder." I looked down at the dish towel in my hands, still damp from the rinse water. "I just need my independence," I whispered. She didn't answer, only turned and left the room. The faucet dripped behind her, marking time I no longer controlled. Later, I found the front curtains pulled shut, all of them. She used to keep them open so light could spill across the floor. Now the room stayed dim, even at noon. When I reached to lift one corner, she appeared behind me. "We don't need people looking in," she said. I froze, fingers on the fabric. "You're worried about what they'll see?" I asked. "I'm worried about gossip," she said. Her reflection caught in the glass, sharp, certain. "You've said enough to strangers already." After she left, I sat on the couch, staring at the locked door. The metal glinted faintly under the hallway light, so ordinary it might as well have been invisible. I thought of my son, her brother, who lived 2 states away and hadn't called in 6 months. She always said he was too busy, but I wondered if she ever told him how things really were. Maybe she didn't have to. Maybe silence was her inheritance from me, passed down without meaning to. The next morning brought another chill, sharper this time. The kitchen window was open just enough to let in a draft that cut through my sleeves. I stood there, feeling it sting my hands, and realized I hadn't stepped outside in 4 days. The smell of cold air mixed with the faint detergent from last night's wash. The world beyond that door was still there. Cars, people, air, but unreachable. I didn't tell her I'd called the police. I wanted to keep one secret of my own. She avoided me for most of the day, moving through the house like I wasn't part of it. Her husband said little, eyes down whenever we crossed paths. Once, I heard him say, "Maybe we're going too far." She answered too quickly, "You weren't here when she forgot the stove." I hadn't forgotten anything. The pilot light had gone out. But lies are easier to feed than truth. They grow faster, hungrier. That night, the hallway light flickered. I reached for the knob of my bedroom door. It didn't move. On the other side, her voice drifted low, steady, almost gentle. "You rest now, all right?" A pause. "We'll talk tomorrow." The air felt heavier, stiller. My pulse matched the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I pressed my ear to the door. Then, clear as anything, I heard the deadbolt turn behind me. Emma handed me a clipboard like I worked for her. It wasn't a request. It was an order disguised as efficiency. "We'll keep things organized," she said, tapping the top with her finger. The smell of dust drifted up from the pages, dry and faint, the kind that clings to paper no one plans to keep. She handed me a pen. "Just write what you do each day. Cleaning, cooking, whatever. It's for the household budget." I nodded, though my stomach turned. She was rewriting care into currency. That night, I started counting. Every chore, every hour. 2 loads of laundry, 1 scrubbed bathroom, 3 meals cooked from scratch, 40 hours in 1 week, and that wasn't rest. It was labor. I wrote it down neatly, my small rebellion in ink. The clipboard felt heavier each time I lifted it, like proof that I was disappearing into routine. Somewhere between her orders and my compliance, I had stopped being family and started being staff. When she looked over my notes, she smiled. "See? You're productive. It helps me keep track." Her voice was calm, but her eyes scanned each line like a supervisor reading a report. I asked quietly, "Track for what?" She didn't answer. She just moved to the next page. That silence said enough. My worth had become measurable, listed in tasks and minutes. One evening, while she was out, I searched online for something, anything, that named what I was living. I found an article about unpaid domestic labor. The words hit hard. Work performed without compensation under family authority. It might as well have been my biography. There was even a link to the Employment Bureau, offering a form for informal caregivers. The stakes sharpened in that moment. If I didn't document this, it would vanish like every favor before it. I printed the form, smoothed it flat, and filled it in by lamplight. The paper felt rough under my hand, almost gritty, like it didn't want to be touched. I listed my duties, my hours, and when the line asked for supervisor, I paused. My pen hovered. Then I wrote her name. It looked strange in that space, like an accusation that didn't need words. I signed my own at the bottom. For the first time in months, I felt something close to control. When I mailed the form the next morning, I didn't tell her. I just walked to the corner box and slid it through the slot. The sound of the envelope dropping was soft, but final. A small act, invisible to her, yet enormous to me. Proof existed now, not just memory. I'd drawn a line, and even if no one believed me, the line was mine. 3 days later, she found out. I was folding towels when I heard the slap of the clipboard hitting the counter. "What is this?" she demanded. Her voice cracked like glass. "You reported me?" I didn't answer right away. "I filled out a form," I said. "It's not a report, it's documentation." She laughed, short and sharp. "Ungrateful! I take you in and you try to get me in trouble?" She lifted the clipboard and threw it across the room. It hit the wall, splintering the edge. Dust floated where it landed, catching the weak afternoon sun. "You should be ashamed," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't understand what you're doing." I picked up the broken piece, still holding the pen attached by its string. "I understand perfectly," I said quietly. "I'm keeping records, like you asked." The look she gave me then wasn't anger. It was recognition. She realized I wasn't going back to silence. After she stormed out, I gathered the shards of the clipboard and placed them in a drawer. Each crack felt symbolic, the physical echo of something already fractured between us. The air in the house grew still. Even the usual hum of the refrigerator felt distant. I sat at the table, hands resting on the clean surface, and thought about what I'd done. Maybe the Bureau would ignore it. Maybe nothing would come of it. But at least someone, somewhere, would see the numbers. 40 hours, 7 days, one name written under supervisor. I went to bed earlier than usual that night. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that warns before it strikes. From my room, I could hear faint tapping, her typing on her laptop, maybe changing something, erasing something. I stayed still, pretending to sleep. A chill crept under the door. In the morning, I tried to check my email to see if the Bureau had replied. The Wi-Fi wouldn't connect. I tried again. Incorrect password. I reset the router, unplugged it, plugged it back in. Nothing. When she passed through the hallway, I asked, "Did the Wi-Fi change?" She smiled without turning. We needed better security. Her voice carried that same calm tone she used when she took my keys, the one that made control sound like care. That night, the glow from the router light blinked once, then went dark completely. I stared at it, feeling the familiar chill settle in. Freedom, it seemed, could vanish with a single password. That night, the Wi-Fi password changed. A woman from Adult Services stood in my doorway. She introduced herself as Dana and showed her badge, the edges slightly bent from use. Behind her, the late afternoon light spilled across the floor, thin and sharp. I didn't invite her in right away. Emma appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, smiling too wide. "We're fine here," she said brightly. Dana looked past her, eyes landing on me. "I'd like to hear that from you." I stepped aside. Dana's presence shifted the air, professional but kind. "You deserve rest," she said after glancing at my hands. The skin was cracked, red at the joints. I tucked them into my sleeves. "Can we talk somewhere private?" she asked. Emma laughed, light but brittle. "Of course. My mother can talk all she wants." The word mother sounded wrong in her mouth, like a formality she'd outgrown. We sat at the dining table. The smell of disinfectant lingered, too clean, like preparation for inspection. Dana opened her notebook and began with simple questions. "How are you? Managing your recovery?" "Fine." "Are you being helped?" "Yes." I hesitated. Her pen stopped mid-sentence. "You can be honest," she said softly. I looked toward Emma, who was leaning on the counter, arms crossed. "She's doing great," Emma answered for me. "Sometimes she forgets how lucky she is." Dana met my eyes. "Would you mind showing me your hands again?" I held them out. The thin scabs across my knuckles caught the light. She leaned closer, studying them without touching. "When did these happen?" "Cleaning," I said. "Just housework." Emma's voice cut in. "She insists on overdoing it. I tell her to rest." Dana kept her focus on me. "How many hours a day would you say you work around the house?" The question felt heavier than it sounded. "A few," I said. Emma's heel tapped once against the tile. Dana wrote something, then closed the notebook. "I'd like to schedule a follow-up," she said. "Maybe talk again when it's just you." I nodded. Emma smiled again, that rehearsed curve of control. "Of course, but really, we're fine." Dana slipped a card across the table. "If anything changes, call me directly." Her eyes lingered on me before she left. Emma didn't say goodbye. When the door closed, the house felt smaller. I turned the card over in my hand, memorizing the number. It looked harmless, yet it pulsed with possibility. I tucked it under a jar lid on the counter, as if hiding a secret could keep it safe. That evening, Emma's tone shifted. "You didn't tell her about our arrangement, did you?" I stayed silent. "You can't let strangers interfere." She moved closer. "They twist things," I said. She asked about my hands. "And you told her you hurt them cleaning?" "Yes." "Then don't make her think it's my fault." Her voice was calm, almost soothing. That calmness was worse than shouting. Later, while she cooked, the kitchen lights seemed brighter than usual. The glare bounced off the metal pot, the countertop, the white tile. My eyes watered, though not from heat. I felt exposed, like I'd said too much without realizing it. I caught her watching me as I rubbed lotion into my palms. "You're making this dramatic," she said. "I'm not." "You are. You always do." Her husband came in halfway through, grabbed a drink, and left again. Neither of us spoke until the door shut behind him. I cleaned in silence that night, wiping the counters, organizing drawers, moving just to keep busy. The thought of Dana's notebook followed me, the way her pen paused before each question. Maybe she saw what I couldn't say. Maybe she'd come back before Emma locked me further in. At dinner, the air felt thick. She poured water into my glass, too full, the surface trembling at the rim. "You shouldn't have talked so much," she said quietly. "I didn't. Don't play innocent." She leaned in. "If you talk again, you'll regret it." My chores doubled the morning after Dana left. The lists returned, longer, sharper, written in bold marker. By noon, I was hauling garbage bags to the curb and scrubbing the porch steps on my knees. The rubber gloves she gave me were torn at the fingertips, and the soap burned when it touched my skin. The faint smell of bleach followed me from room to room, clinging to my sleeves like accusation. When I looked down, my hands were raw again, pink around the joints. She called it keeping busy. I called it punishment. "You had a visitor," she said that morning, her tone sugar-coated. "Maybe she thinks you're still weak. Prove her wrong." I wanted to say I didn't have to prove anything, but I bit my tongue. Survival has a sound. Silence. I did what I could, one chore at a time, until my fingers stopped bending easily. By the third day, the swelling made it hard to grip the broom. "I need to see a doctor," I said quietly. "For what?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "My hands." "Doctors exaggerate," she said. "Rest a day and you'll be fine." But rest wasn't an option. The following morning, she handed me a rake and pointed toward the yard. "Leaves won't move themselves." I waited until she left for the grocery store, then walked to the clinic 2 blocks away. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and old magazines. A nurse looked at my hands and frowned. The doctor arrived, middle-aged, kind-eyed. "This looks like repetitive strain," he said. "How long has it been this bad?" "A few weeks," I answered, though I knew it was longer. He asked if I had help at home. I hesitated. "Sort of," I said. "Family?" "Yes." He didn't push further. "I'll document the swelling and note limited mobility. You'll need rest and a splint." He typed quickly, then printed the note. "You should keep this," he said. "It's your record." He promised to send a copy to Adult Services in case they were following up. That word, copy, felt heavier than the paper itself. Proof. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my purse, next to the card Dana had given me. For a moment, I felt seen. When I returned home, the house was silent. I placed the paper inside a drawer, under the dish towels. Later, she came in carrying bags. "Did you go out?" she asked. "Just for a walk." "You're limping." "I'm fine." She watched me for a few seconds too long. "You know," she said slowly, "some people think they can talk to outsiders and nothing will come of it. But people gossip. It always circles back." She unpacked groceries, milk, bread, cleaning supplies, and set a new bottle of bleach on the counter. The message wasn't subtle. I kept working through the evening, scrubbing the sink until my wrists screamed. The gloves filled with warm water where the seams had split. "You missed a spot," she said from behind me. I wiped again, swallowing the anger that wanted out. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every pulse of pain reminded me what silence was costing me. I whispered to the dark, "This ends soon." My own voice sounded foreign, like a stranger making promises. The next morning, she was already on the phone. I caught fragments: clinic, mistake, authorization. My heart dropped. She was calling them. When she hung up, she turned to me. "You won't need to go back," she said flatly. "They understand now." I didn't ask what she told them. I didn't need to. The kitchen still smelled faintly of disinfectant, the same as the clinic, but here it felt suffocating. I sat at the table, staring at my hands wrapped in gauze. They looked like proof of everything she denied. I couldn't shake the sense that the walls were listening, collecting every small betrayal. That evening, I checked the drawer for the note. It was still there, folded neatly, the ink slightly smudged from my touch. I ran a finger over my name, the one line that couldn't be rewritten. Outside, the wind carried the sound of a passing car, brief and distant. It made me wonder what leaving would cost, and what staying already had. I fell asleep sitting up, the smell of bleach still in my hair. The next morning, she stood over me with the mail in her hand. "Something for you," she said. The envelope was plain, my name typed wrong, one letter missing. A small thing, but it made my stomach tighten. I took it, already knowing it wasn't kindness. Then came the envelope with my name misspelled. It was a notice to vacate, unsigned, but typed in her font. The paper was smooth, heavier than regular printer stock, as if weight could make it official. My name was wrong, Marta instead of Martha, a small cruelty she'd pretend was a typo. "You're no longer welcome in residence," it said, the phrasing neat and cold. I read it twice, trying to decide if she wanted me gone or just frightened. Either way, it worked. The chill from the kitchen window brushed across my hands as I held the page. When she came home, I asked, "Did you write this?" She didn't answer right away. "If it's on the counter, I probably printed it. It says I need to leave." "Then maybe you should," she said, dropping her keys into the bowl. Her tone was casual, like she was talking about recycling, not exile. I folded the notice once, placed it back where I found it, and left it there as proof. Proof of intent, not action. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak in the house felt like eviction in motion. The next morning, I took the letter downtown to the tenant board. The building's air conditioning hit like winter. The waiting room hummed with fluorescent lights and quiet frustration. When my number was called, a man named Glenn motioned me into his cubicle. "Show me the document," he said. I passed it over, careful not to crease it further. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the page, and shook his head. "It's not legally valid," he said. "No signature, no filing, no date of service." Relief almost came, but didn't. "Still," he added, "it's intimidation. Keep this copy safe." He slid the paper back to me. "If she tries to force you out, call us. But understand, these situations get messy when it's family." "I just need somewhere safe to sleep," I said. He sighed. "You're not the first to say that." The air in that office was cold enough to sting my fingers. I rubbed them together, staring at the notice in my lap. I'd come looking for help and left feeling cross-examined. The stakes weren't about housing anymore. They were about survival. I walked home slowly, clutching the paper in my coat pocket like it might disappear if I blinked. When I returned, the front door was unlocked. She was in the living room, rearranging furniture. "You went out?" she asked, not looking up. I needed advice. "About what?" I hesitated. "The letter." Her hands froze on the armchair. "I told you not to take things so seriously." "It felt serious." She turned, smiling without warmth. "Then maybe you should pack." I stared at her, and she stared back, both of us holding our breath. "You can't lock me out," I said finally. Her voice softened, almost sympathetic. "Of course not. I'd never do that." Then she walked down the hall and closed her door. By dinner, she acted as if nothing had happened. I ate quietly, every bite tasting of metal. The letter lay in my room, creased now, edges damp from my hands. I imagined it multiplying, pages of eviction notices covering the walls, all with my name spelled wrong. Later that night, I checked the locks before bed. The hallway light flickered once, casting shadows over the window curtain. I felt the draft creep through the edges, brushing against my neck. Somewhere behind me, a door hinge squeaked. I told myself not to turn around. Not yet. The air in the house had changed. Thicker, heavier, holding something unseen. Around midnight, I heard her footsteps outside my room. Slow, careful. Then came the sound of metal sliding into the latch. One click, a pause, then another. The lock clicked twice, once for her, once for me. I found her secret folder on the family computer. It was past midnight, and the house was still, except for the faint hum of the hard drive. The glow of the screen washed the room pale. I wasn't looking for secrets, just distraction, but curiosity has its own gravity. One click opened her email, another opened the folder. The titles were dull at first: household, bills, photos. Then one caught my eye. Transfers. I clicked again. Inside were messages from the bank, confirmations of deposits and withdrawals. I scrolled faster, pulse matching the rhythm of the fan beneath the desk. Each line had my name in the memo field, but the recipient wasn't me. She'd been moving money from my pension. $12,000 split into neat transactions. The figure burned into my mind, more shocking than any insult she'd thrown. I took screenshots of everything: emails, account summaries, even the confirmation dates. Each click of the mouse sounded louder, echoing through the quiet room like a countdown. When I saved the files to a USB drive, my hands shook. The whir of the machine felt almost alive, like it knew the damage it held. I sat there, staring at the frozen screen, unsure if what I'd found was theft or something worse. "It's just money," I whispered, though it wasn't. It was trust, rewritten in digits. I looked at her photo on the desktop, Emma and her husband smiling in front of their new car, and felt a bitterness that settled deep, steady. By morning, I filed a fraud report online through the bank's security page. The questions were straightforward: account numbers, amounts, authorization. I typed slowly, afraid to make a mistake that could erase the truth. When the confirmation message appeared, I printed it and slipped it under the mattress. The paper's edges were still warm from the printer, faintly curled. Proof existed now, tangible and unalterable. That afternoon, she caught me at the desk. "What are you doing on my computer?" "Checking my balance," I said. "Your balance is fine," she replied. "You don't need to worry about things like that." "I think I do." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know where my money went." Her hand froze on the mouse. "Excuse me?" I met her stare. $12,000. Transfers you made." She laughed, but it came out too high, too sharp. "It's family money," she said, shaking her head. "We share everything here." That phrase broke something final inside me. "I didn't agree to that," I said quietly. "Then maybe you should start," she snapped. "Everything you have came through me anyway." For once, I didn't cry. I turned off the screen, stood, and walked out without another word. Behind me, she shouted, "You're not going to ruin this house with your paranoia." The words chased me down the hall, but I didn't turn back. In my room, I gathered the printouts, lined them in order, and slipped them into a folder. I wrote one word across the front in thick pen: truth. I knew it wasn't safety, but it was armor. When I held it, my hands stopped trembling. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had ground beneath me. That evening, I called the fraud unit directly. The woman on the line listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "We've received your report. Keep all documentation. You may be contacted soon." Her voice was professional, but I heard concern beneath it. "Don't share this with anyone until we reach out." "I won't," I said. "I promise." Dinner was tense. She watched me, searching for signs. "You seem quiet," she said. "I'm tired," I answered. Her husband spoke without looking up from his plate. "You two need to stop acting like enemies." "We're not enemies," she said, smiling thinly. "Are we, Mother?" The word came out coated in ice. I forced a nod, though I could feel her suspicion tightening like wire. Later, when I went to bed, I left my phone recording on the nightstand. Habit now, not fear. She came in not long after, standing in the doorway. "You've been busy," she said softly. "I've been resting." She stepped closer. "You shouldn't touch things that don't belong to you." "Like what?" "You know what?" Her voice lowered to a whisper. "If you talk to anyone again, I'll make sure they stop listening." Then she turned and left. I lay still, the faint red light from the phone blinking beside me. Each blink was a heartbeat, each second a small victory. Because what she didn't know was that I'd already saved the file to the drive, and now I had her voice too. She realized I'd been recording her threats. My voice echoed through the county hall. The ceiling was high, the walls pale, and every sound carried too far. Rows of chairs stretched back, filled with neighbors, volunteers, even Dana from Adult Services. The light overhead was fierce, flattening everything into sharp edges. I stood at the microphone, the folder of proof tight in my hands. Across the room, she sat at the defense table, looking smaller than she ever allowed herself to be. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Do you understand the charge?" he asked her. She nodded, voice barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." He turned to me. "You may speak, Mrs." He paused, checking the document. "You may proceed." I opened my folder. My fingers shook slightly, but my voice held. "This began with a promise of care," I said. Then came control, and then came theft. A murmur rippled through the seats behind me. I went on, line by line, reading from my notes, the same notes I'd rehearsed alone at the kitchen table under the faint flicker of a single bulb. When I reached the part about the $12,000 withdrawn from my pension, I heard her scoff. "That's exaggerated," she said. The judge looked over his glasses. "You'll have your turn." She crossed her arms. "She's confused. She's been unwell lately." That word, confused, landed like a slap. I steadied my breath. "I recorded her," I said. "The threats, the withdrawals, the instructions to the bank." I handed the folder to the clerk, who passed it to the bench. The judge leafed through the pages, his brow tightening with each line. The microphone buzzed softly, and I leaned closer. "She told people I was forgetful," I said, "that I made things up, but every lie left a trace, and I kept every trace." The folder felt lighter now that it wasn't in my hands. I'd carried its weight for too long. The judge nodded once to the bailiff, who pressed play on a small recorder. My own voice filled the room, trembling, but clear. Then hers followed, cold and steady. "If you talk again, you'll regret it." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with disbelief. A man from the back muttered, "My God." Someone else whispered, "She said that to her mother?" The words weren't meant for me, but they reached me anyway. Emma shifted in her seat, her calm slipping. "That's out of context," she said. "She forgets things. She confuses dates. Half those papers she brought could be fake." The judge looked up. "You're alleging fabrication?" "I'm saying she's unstable," she replied. "She's elderly and emotional. She doesn't always understand what's real." Gaslight. Clean, practiced, rehearsed. I'd heard that tone for months, but this time I wasn't alone. Dana stood up from the second row, holding a document. "Your Honor," she said, "Adult Services submitted a verified injury report and financial statement supporting the plaintiff's timeline." The judge nodded for her to approach. "Place it on the record." As she handed it over, I caught her eye. She gave a small nod, quiet solidarity. I felt my chest loosen for the first time in months. The lights above burned white, too bright, and yet I didn't look away. The judge flipped through the report. "This corroborates the claim," he said. "Clinic findings confirm repetitive strain injuries consistent with domestic labor." He looked back at Emma. "Do you dispute this medical evidence?" Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she stayed silent. The quiet dragged on until the only sound was the hum of the ceiling lights. "Do you understand," the judge continued, "that misappropriation of funds and coercive care violations are criminal matters?" Emma finally spoke. "She's making this bigger than it is. We're family. Families argue. Families exaggerate." I took a step forward. "Families protect," I said. "They don't destroy." The judge tapped his pen once, then again, signaling the end of patience. "Enough," he said. "This is not a family disagreement. This is a legal proceeding." He turned to the clerk. Read the witness transcript." The clerk stood and began to read aloud from the statement I'd given 2 weeks earlier. Hearing my own words in that echoing hall was surreal, every line stripped of emotion, factual and simple. Subject describes unauthorized withdrawals, verbal threats, and physical exhaustion resulting from imposed domestic duties. Each sentence landed like a hammer. Emma sat motionless, face blank. Her husband kept his head down, fingers clasped. When the clerk finished, the judge looked up again. "I'll be requesting the clinic's full report and the bank's certified transaction logs. Both parties will receive copies." He removed his glasses, folding them carefully. The room seemed to shrink around that gesture, every whisper fading. My knees trembled, but I stood my ground. Then, after a long pause, he spoke the words that changed everything. "This will move to trial." The courtroom smelled of paper and old carpet. The scent came first, then the cold of recycled air against my face. Rows of strangers filled the gallery, their attention pointed like arrows. I stood where the clerk told me and kept my hands folded so the tremor wouldn't show. Across the aisle, she sat with her attorney, posture perfect, mouth set. I told myself to breathe in counts, slow and even. Today was about proof, not fear. I had brought enough of both. The judge glanced up. "Proceed." My attorney rose, a calm presence at my shoulder. He held the state report like it might burn through the folder. "Your Honor, the financial exploitation report by the state." His voice stayed even. The clerk took it, stepped to the bench, paper slid, a pen tapped. Somewhere in back, someone coughed. I kept my eyes forward. "Read your summary," the judge said. "Yes, Your Honor." My attorney began. "Unapproved transfers totaling $12,000, corroborated by transaction confirmations and corroborating testimony." His words were simple, each one heavier than the last. I watched her shift, the tiny movement she made when she felt cornered. It had always been that small, the tell that she was about to argue the sun out of the sky. She leaned toward her attorney, a whisper. Then she looked straight at me. "You wanted this," she mouthed. For once, I answered aloud. "I wanted peace." A ripple slid through the room. "Cross," the judge said. Her attorney stood, smiling like this was casual conversation. "You've been under stress," he began. "Isn't it possible you misunderstood the arrangements?" I met his eyes. "No." He tilted his head. "Memory can be tricky." "Not this," I said. "Not money, not threats." He stepped closer to the witness stand. "Let's be specific." His tone brightened. "Who controlled your daily spending?" "She did." "By permission?" "No." "You never consented?" "I never did." He spread his hands. "But you lived in her home." The room tightened. "I lived in my fear," I said. "That's not consent." A flicker passed the judge's face, part impatience, part attention. My attorney took over again, voice firm. "Play the recording." The bailiff pressed a button. My voice filled the room first, tired and steady, then hers. "If you talk again, you'll regret." Gasps, the fast kind people try to swallow and can't. From the second row, a woman whispered, "She said that?" A man closer to the aisle muttered, "Unbelievable." Another voice, almost a hiss, "To her own?" The words landed and kept landing. I let them. I had spent months taking hits alone. Now the sound carried for me. Her attorney tried to smile it away. "Out of context," he said. "Families argue." He turned to the bench. "She misconstrues tone." My attorney lifted the folder. "There's context enough. The state report, the clinic note, the bank summaries, and you will find the same directive in her emails." The judge raised a hand. "We have the report. Keep to the question." Stakes are why you endure the room, the stairs, the rules. Mine was simple. If the court did not see me, I would disappear in a house I once trusted. I adjusted the microphone. "I am here because I want safety," I said. "Not revenge. Safety." A hush followed, a clean one. Her attorney changed angles. You recorded her without permission. I recorded my life, I said. He tried again. You once forgot a pot on the stove. The pilot light went out. You called the police for a misunderstanding. They called it that, I answered. I called for help. A short exchange, tight as wire. You exaggerate. I document. You resent. I survive. You lied. I kept receipts. Silence settled again. The clock over the doors ticked like a metronome I refused to hear. My attorney nodded to me, a small signal. One last point, he said to the judge. We ask that the state's written notice be entered as an exhibit. The judge held out his hand. The clerk delivered the file. He read for a long beat, then set it down with care. Admitted, he said. The word moved through me like a release I hadn't allowed. Around us, chairs creaked. Someone whispered, "Good." Another, barely audible, "About time." Her husband stood abruptly, but the bailiff's look sat him down. She stared at the table, then at me, and blinked too slowly. My attorney spoke once more, voice quiet. Nothing further. The judge's tone drew every eye. The record reflects the entry of the state's report, he said. All evidence and argument are preserved. He glanced at the clock, then back to us. The court will return in 2 minutes for the decision. We stood because everyone stood. When he came back, the room held its breath. He read the decision line by line, measured and final. I didn't hear the last sentence so much as feel it land across the wood and carpet. Emma's face turned blank as the verdict was read. Guilty of financial exploitation and coercive control. The words landed without echo, sharp and absolute. The judge's voice stayed calm, but every syllable carried weight. Emma's shoulders jerked once, as though she hadn't heard right. Her attorney leaned in, whispering something that didn't change her face. The gavel came down. One strike, deliberate, final. The courtroom didn't erupt, it exhaled. I felt it in my chest, that long withheld breath everyone had been holding. I didn't move at first. I just looked at the folder in my lap, the same one that had followed me through every office, every hearing. The edges were worn, soft from being opened too many times. Inside it now rested the signed order with the embossed court seal, rough under my thumb, ridged like a scar. The judge continued. Restitution in the amount of $12,000, payable within 90 days. Sentence suspended pending compliance. I barely heard the rest. Numbers that once felt stolen now sounded like closure. Emma's lawyer tried to protest, a low murmur that the judge waved away. Beside me, the social worker touched my sleeve. "You did it," she whispered. I turned to her, not trusting myself to answer. She smiled anyway. "We'll help you transition," she said. "There's a program, assisted housing, clean start. You'll qualify." I nodded, not sure what to feel. Relief isn't loud. It's quiet, heavy, and slow to sink in. Across the aisle, Emma began to cry. Not the kind of tears that seek forgiveness, more like the kind that demand pity. I didn't watch long. There was nothing left to fix between us. Her husband kept his gaze on the floor, tapping his shoe against the bench, waiting for it all to end. When the bailiff gestured for us to rise, I stood. My knees trembled, but it wasn't weakness this time. It was release. People clapped softly, like in a church when silence feels sacred. I caught Dana's face in the crowd, calm and proud. She mouthed, "You're safe now." The judge gathered his notes. Court is adjourned. Another strike of the gavel, another tremor through the room. I looked one last time at the wooden bench, the place where fear had been cross-examined and finally overruled. As we filed out, the clerk stopped me. "Ma'am, this copy's for you." He handed over the official document, crisp, embossed, unchangeable. The folder that once carried dread now held freedom. Outside the courtroom, a few people nodded as I passed. Small gestures, quiet solidarity. I didn't speak to any of them. I wanted the stillness. The hallway smelled faintly of varnish and old dust, familiar, but different somehow, as if the building itself recognized closure. The social worker walked with me to the front steps. "We'll start paperwork tomorrow," she said. "You'll have your new place before month's end." "Thank you," I managed. For believing me, she smiled. Most people just needed to see what you already knew. At the base of the stairs, I paused. The courthouse doors were heavy, brass polished from countless hands. I pushed them open slowly. The air outside carried warmth I hadn't felt in months. I stopped for a moment, squinting. Freedom, I realized, didn't shout. It waited. It waited until the last signature, the last stamp, the last apology, never spoken. I stepped forward, clutching the folder like proof that truth, though bruised, had survived the trial. Behind me, the doors closed with a soft thud. Ahead, the street shimmered in midday brightness. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. Outside, the sunlight felt unfamiliar on my skin. The house stood smaller than I remembered. The paint had dulled, the shrubs were overgrown, and the porch boards creaked under the officers' boots. It was strange seeing it like this. Familiar walls turned foreign. One of the officers nodded for me to go ahead. "Take your time," he said. I didn't plan to. Inside, the air was cold and still. Boxes sat waiting in the hallway, already marked with my name. I opened the first one, finding the photo frames I'd once dusted every Sunday. Her handwriting was still on the back of one. Family, 2012. I set it aside gently. The mug she'd given me years ago lay wrapped in paper, chipped at the rim. I kept it anyway. Some things survive out of habit, not love. Emma stood by the doorway, arms crossed. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The officers flanked her, neutral and quiet, one holding the clipboard. "We'll need both signatures," the taller one said. She nodded, lips pressed tight. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the same old sound that once meant comfort. Now it was just background noise like static. "How long will this take?" she asked. "Not long," I answered. "You got what you wanted," she muttered. I paused, folding my quilt neatly into a box. "No," I said softly. "I got what was mine." Her silence was sharper than her words. The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if you could sign here." She grabbed the pen, scrawled her name so fast the paper tore slightly. I added my signature beneath hers, steady, deliberate. The ink bled faintly into the fibers. That tiny mark felt like the end of a long sentence. The officer tore off my copy and handed it to me. "This verifies the return of personal property," he said. "All accounted for." The paper was cool between my fingers, edges crisp. Another proof, another piece of order restored. I walked through the living room once more, scanning what remained. The couch where I used to sit with her, the corner table she'd once insisted I polish, the porch light outside flickering weakly through the window. It looked dimmer now, or maybe I was just seeing clearly for the first time. Behind me, she spoke again, voice flat. "You think this fixes anything?" "It doesn't need to," I replied. "It just ends it." She laughed once without humor. "You always did like to play the victim." I stopped playing a long time ago. She turned away, pretending to check her phone. The officers avoided looking at either of us. The one near the door said quietly, "Ma'am, we'll escort you out once you're ready." I sealed the last box with tape, pressing the strip down firmly. My hands didn't shake this time. I'd spent too long proving I wasn't fragile. I stacked the smaller boxes by the door, leaving the heavier ones for later pickup. As I stepped into the hallway, I glanced back at the framed picture still hanging by the stairwell, Emma and her husband smiling, sunlight across their faces. It had once made me proud. Now it only reminded me how easy it was to fake warmth for a camera. On the counter near the sink, my old keys lay in a neat row. I picked one up, turned it once in my hand, and set it back down. The officer closest to me nodded slightly, like he understood the weight of that small gesture. "You good?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm done." Outside, the wind cut through my coat. It wasn't harsh, just brisk enough to make me aware of it. The air smelled faintly of damp leaves and cold metal. The street looked unchanged, but nothing about it felt the same. The porch light flickered once more as I crossed the yard, casting brief flashes across the boxes in my arms. I didn't turn around to see if she was watching. At the car, the officer opened the trunk. "All set?" Everything that matters, I said. He smiled faintly. That's usually enough. I looked back one final time, not at her, but at the door I'd walked through countless times before, now just wood and hinges. The chapter had been written, read, and closed. There was no victory in it, only balance restored. I carried the boxes to the car, shut the trunk, and straightened up. The wind eased. The house behind me stood silent. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the spare key, and walked it back up the steps. The doormat lifted easily, the same hiding spot she'd never bothered to change. I set the key on her counter. Then I turned and left. A reporter called the next week. Her voice was calm, careful, the kind that has seen both sides of a story and still knows how to listen. "I'm writing a follow-up on the trial," she said. "Would you like to comment?" I hesitated, then asked, "Will my name be printed?" There was a pause. "Only if you want it to be." I thought about all the times I'd been erased, dismissed, spoken over. "Yes," I said finally, "print it." That morning, the sky was clear. Sunlight reached across the kitchen table, catching the rim of my teacup. The smell of damp soil drifted in from the garden. I had just begun to learn what quiet could mean, how it could fill space without needing permission. She arrived 2 days later with a notebook and a small recorder. "You don't have to relive it all," she assured me. "Just what you're comfortable sharing." I nodded, then began. I told her about the clipboard, the complaint, the photographs, the courtroom. She didn't interrupt. Only once did she ask, "What kept you going?" "Truth," I said, even when no one believed it. Her pen stopped moving. She looked up and smiled faintly. That's the line that will stay with people. When she left, the garden felt quieter again. The gate swung once, metal against wood, and then settled. I wasn't sure how it would feel to have everything written down, turned into someone else's story. But I knew this. Silence had protected her long enough. Now it was my turn to speak. On Sunday morning, the newspaper lay folded on the porch. I brought it in with trembling hands. The headline was simple, no exaggeration. "Local woman wins, case against caregiver exploitation." My name appeared below, plain black ink against white. The sunlight hit the page as I read it. For the first time, the truth didn't feel like a wound. It felt like proof. I read the article twice. It told the facts, how she'd controlled my finances, the legal restitution of $12,000, the sentence suspended under supervision. But in between the lines, it said something more, that justice can take years, but it can arrive. I placed the paper on the table and watched the light slide slowly across it. By noon, messages began arriving. Letters slipped through the mail slot. Others came by email. A woman wrote, "I cared for my brother 10 years without pay." Another said, "You made me feel seen." One envelope held no words, only a pressed flower and a note that read, "For your garden." I cried reading that one. Not from sadness, just the weight of being understood. I spent the afternoon outside. The earth was cool under my fingers as I pulled weeds from the flower bed. The newspaper lay beside me on the garden chair, edges curling in the breeze. I kept glancing at it, half afraid it would vanish like the rest of my evidence once had. But it stayed, solid and real. Later, the reporter called again. "We've had a big response," she said. "People want to know how you're doing." "I'm planting," I told her, "starting over." "That sounds like peace." Something close to it. We both went quiet for a moment, the kind of silence that doesn't hurt. Before hanging up, she said, "I hope you know you changed something." After she hung up, I sat for a long while, listening to the wind move through the garden. The sunlight faded across the fence, leaving a soft trace on the newspaper still resting nearby. I picked it up, smoothing the wrinkles with my palm. The print left a faint smudge on my fingertips, a reminder that ink, once dry, can still leave a mark. When evening came, I went inside and folded the paper carefully, edge to edge. It didn't need to stay on display. I'd lived too long with other people's eyes on my pain. This part was for me alone. I carried it to my desk, opened the drawer, and placed it beneath the folder of court documents. Proof beside proof, truth beside truth. I closed the drawer gently and turned the key. I folded the paper and locked it in a drawer. I wake before dawn now, by habit, not fear. The house rests in its own quiet rhythm, the kind that no longer listens for footsteps or doors. I fill the kettle and wait, the faint steam rising before the sun. The scent of tea drifts through the kitchen, earthy and calm, wrapping around the same mug I've used for years. It feels different in my hand now, steady, owned, earned. My mornings begin this way, simple, deliberate. I walk to the community center as the sky turns pale orange, streets still empty, air sharp and clear. The building opens at 7, and I'm usually the first one through the door. There's a small desk near the window where I help sort intake forms for women seeking support. Some are older, some barely grown, all carrying the same mix of exhaustion and hope I once did. "Morning," one of them says softly as I enter. "Morning," I reply. "Let's start with coffee. It's never about advice, mostly it's listening." Sometimes one story cracks open another, and the room fills with quiet understanding. A few days ago, a woman with tired eyes said, "You must have been through something." I smiled. "We all have," I said. She nodded, as if that was enough. It was. The volunteer coordinator, a patient man named Rob, hands me a clipboard every morning. "You're early again," he teases. "Old habits," I tell him. He grins. "We like those habits here." I sign the roster, my name in black ink among dozens of others. It's a small act, but it feels monumental, the opposite of being erased. Proof of being here, part of something rebuilding instead of surviving. By mid-morning, the rooms buzz with motion. A kettle whistles, papers shuffle, laughter echoes faintly through the hall. I guide one woman to the counseling office, help another find housing forms. Between tasks, I glance outside at the sunrise climbing higher. The warmth through the window reminds me of that first morning after court, the air so bright it hurt to look at. I'd told myself, "You'll never have to worry again." Back then, I didn't quite believe it. Now, the words feel like truth settling into the bones. At noon, Rob stops by again. "You doing okay?" he asks. "Better than okay," I say. He nods, satisfied. "You know, people notice. They say you bring calm with you." I laugh. That's just the tea. When the day ends, I stay behind to wipe the tables, straighten chairs, and water the plants by the window. The smell of soap and brewed tea lingers together. Ordinary, grounding. A woman waves as she leaves. "See you tomorrow?" she asks. "Every morning," I promise. Outside, the sun dips low, throwing gold across the sidewalk. I walk home slowly, the mug tucked in my bag. The streets glow faintly, alive again in their quiet. Each step feels measured, owned. The air is cool, but the peace sits warm under my ribs. Back inside, I pour one last cup and sit by the window. The horizon softens into blue. My reflection looks older, but unafraid. I whisper to the empty room, "You'll never have to worry again." The kettle clicks off behind me, the world small and safe. Peace feels like work, but it's mine now. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story, with respect and gratitude.